Good morning. Welcome to the matinee today at the 27th of May 2018. Today we are not only here in Tamera, in the Tamera community with our guests here, but more than 300 people who are logged in online and who participate in the webinar with Dieter Duhm. Welcome to the world here in this space. Today we will hear an interview with Dieter Duhm with the title 50 Years After 1968. How do we overcome capitalism today? Dieter Duhm in the 68 movement was one of the leading figures of the student movement of the new left, and back then he coined the term revolution without emancipation is counter-revolution, and he became known for his book Fear in Capitalism, which was a bestseller back then. And within the student movement, the revolution movement, happened deceit, happened lies, happened up to murders, which caused him to step out of this movement. He stepped out of his marriage, out of his relationships, and he went into solitude and retreat to contemplate on the question, how is peace really possible? And this led him to founding this project, which today is Tamera, and he founded it in 1978, which became Tamera later on. And this interview today will be led by Martin Wieniecki, the leader of the Institute for Global Peace Work. He's a peace worker in Tamera. He's an activist. It's also his birthday today. And this morning will be like this, that we have this common interview. Then we have a short break. I will say more about this later. And then after this break, we will come together again where the questions of the participants of the webinar can be asked. And for the Tamera community, I say that the information and announcements that are given today, I will not present them here on stage, but they are back there on a pin board. I will not announce them. And before I invite Martin Wieniecki and Dieter Duhm to stage, I invite the Moon Riders, the a cappella band of Tamera. I invite them to stage to sing For Each Child That's Born. And we dedicate this song to the birthday child of today and also to the newborn baby in this community, Kaleo, who was born last Monday into this Tamera community. Welcome on stage.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayer, and we are our grandfather's dream. We are the breath of the ancestors. We are the spirit of God. We are Mother We're daughters of dust and sons of great vision. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love. We're lovers of light and builders of cultures. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We're makers of peace and wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayer,
our grandmother's prayer.
we are our grandfather's dream,
our grandfather's dream.
we are the breath of the ancestors,
the breath of the ancestors.
we are the spirit of
the
God,
spirit of God. We are mothers of
mothers of courage,
of
fathers of
daughters
time,
of
daughters of
sons
dust, sons of great vision. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of love, builders of cultures. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith,
makers of peace
and wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayer,
our grandmother's prayer.
we are our grandfather's dream,
our grandfather's dream.
we are the breath of the ancestors,
the breath of the ancestors.
we are the spirit of God,
the spirit of God. We are mothers of courage,
fathers of
daughters of
dust,
sons of great
vision.
We're
We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life,
builders of
cultures. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith,
makers of peace
and wisdom of ages. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Thank you for the beautiful song. Good morning. And once again, a warm welcome to everybody here, and especially for everybody, listener in Germany and many countries, all the friends of the project. I'm looking forward to this webinar. And I also want to say that there is a live chat where you can put questions, post questions that emerge throughout the webinar, and you can send them in for the second part of the event. Exactly 50 years ago, there was a climax of a worldwide youth movement, an anti-imperialistic movement of especially students in Germany, USA, Italy, and France. This climax was in the May of Paris. You, Dieter Duhm, you were a leader of the student movement in the area of Ludwigsburg, Ludwigshafen, and one of the leading thought leaders of Germany in general. And my first question is very simple. Why did you step into that movement? How did you experience this time? And what does it mean for you today?
Happy birthday. The 28th birthday. I'm trying to attune my voice because it slips away time and again these days. The reason why I stepped into the radical aspect, the radical part of the German students' movement was the increasing barbarism and cruelty of international capitalism. This was true for almost all of us. We did not know much about the world, and the news about Vietnam, Persia, and many, many other things, they were so shocking that we had to act. We all of a sudden knew what capitalism meant. We did not know it before. We knew it on an abstract and theoretic level, but we did not know it for real. And we knew what imperialism meant, and that we are living in a society in which imperialism of profit rules the most intimate relationships of people. I will say more about this later, but we knew what kind of cruelties were committed in the outer, and so from there it was the decision to building centers in the Western world which together resist this imperialism. One of the big spokespeople for this movement was Rudi Dutschke, and he spoke of the liberation of the metropolis. These were beautiful, grand words. We found them fascinating. But when I walked through the German city of Mannheim, also a metropolis, I started to doubt these words, whether we can actually liberate it. But first of all this, it was a common enthusiasm, excitement, and the decision that we do no longer participate in that. For sure, definitely, niet, no. We want and need a different world. Each day that we live is taking the lives of other people and animals on this world. We live fully on the costs, on the accounts of others who are murdered in the same day for us to live in a good way. And so we had a common outer enemy. This was very important for the inner cohesion of the movement. A common outer enemy that we could attack, and who had its stations and posts in the everywhere, in the governments, in the ministries, all the way up to the structures of the university. Everywhere was the enemy of the classes with its followers. And that's the way how it is up until today. And this common fight could become integrated by the existing world. and this is a topic that we might come to later. The system we live in cannot be overcome by common fight. This is a very important message. Revolution without emancipation is counter-revolution. A revolution which is carried through by people who in their inner remain the same is always a counter-revolution.
The things that you are mentioning now, the barbarism of international capitalism, this hypocrisy of governments, all this terrible situation. If you look onto history of the last 50 years, then the situation has not improved, but actually gone worse. And different than many people of the many comrades of these days who went back to the bourgeoisie life, you stayed with the question, how can we overcome this system? And what do you say today with all the movements that happened since 1968 that didn't come through? How can we come through? How can we overcome this system?
By creating organization and structures for the self-revelation of the peace workers who are involved, structures and organization in which they together can walk towards an own development of peace with everything they do in their work. We will come to this in a moment. The whole project of the Global Healing Biotopes is an answer towards this revolution movement of the 60s and 70s, and also it is an answer to the current, today's revolution movements. Colombia does not succeed. Let us pray for it to succeed. Today there is elections in Colombia, but it doesn't matter where. Socialism tried to make itself strong by the common focus against the existing system. Evo Morales in Bolivia. And the cruel conflicts that arise in that process, because he realizes that he cannot defeat the claw of capitalism as a single politician. The revolution we need in a humane direction has a very inner direction innerly, because the claw of capitalism does not only exist in exploitation and genocide, but this claw also lives in the moral the moral destruction of the people themselves. And this is what the German student movement back then failed on. What was missing back then was an understanding for the issue of love, sex and partnership. Even though we proclaimed free sexuality, Raimund Reich was one of the spokespersons for this, there was no understanding for this topic. Secondly, what was also missing was an understanding of the topic of religion. Everybody agreed that you had to reject religion when you are on the left side, because nobody ever thought of what religion means in its original sense. And what lacked also as a third point was the total misunderstanding and lack of art. The two leading figures of the student movement, they stopped playing violin because Adorno said, quote, "After Auschwitz, art is no longer possible," end quote. Eros was impossible, art was impossible. All those forces that would have been able to change the human being from within, they were taboo. On this level, there was like different fractions of the movement arose, and many different aspects of the movement, KPDMLs, the Trotskys, the Stalinists, and all other ists. There were so many fractions. It was a total chaos that led to ideological fights all the way up to murder. I am a witness of this. It was unbelievable what in the shortest time, 2 years, grew out of a movement that started out with a total humanitarian, humanistic appeal, and it only took 2 years until the movement had changed and became just as any other revolutionary movements in the past. Committing barbarism, they were stupid and cruel. And what resulted out of this was that within many political groups, at the very basis, in university, in the schools, or in the so-called Republican clubs that we had back then, there was a misery of love that we could no longer bear witness to, that were hard to stand and see. All the love relations failed, and by the way, mine as well. All my love relations, not only one. And I stepped out of all of this in the year 1974. I realized I have to give away everything. I was married, so I had to end my marriage. I had a beautiful car. I needed to give it away. I had an offer to be a professor in Kassel, Germany. I renounced, I declined that offer. I stepped out of my profession in the pedagogical school of Dortmund. I stepped out of all of these things to see what at the very same time exists also in the world. There were very different communities. Damanhur in Italy, Auroville in India, Findhorn in Scotland. We had never heard about that back then. And so I started to be on the search for a spiritual truth. And in order to be able to do that search in the right way, in 1976 I went to Bavaria in a very lonely farmhouse. For half a year I was there in solitude, and I wanted to know how can it continue, because it was clear that it couldn't continue as it was. And it was my prayer also, High Spirit, if you exist, please fulfill the short time that I'm here with a direction, an orientation that I can understand. Show me the line, what is to be done. And the answer that came precisely was, if you really want to create, if you really want a human socialism, start to build a community in which you can practice a humane socialism. And that meant you need to found a community which is capable of dissolving the trauma of all participants of the group, the trauma in sexuality and love, the trauma in the relation to authorities, to parents, to the priests, to God. All of this became the task. This was 1976, early 77. This was when this task came powerful and definitely, and I had no choice. I needed to be obedient to that task and follow that task up until today. And this is the reconnection of a revolution which, for good reasons, wants to revolve, change the conditions of the world. the connection of this revolution with a revolution that back in the times of Martin Luther King happened in the US. There was a connection all of a sudden. 1968, we did not understand Martin Luther King. He said, please, listen. So we were fighting the anti-imperialistic struggle. We were stronger than the police. We were in jail time and again. Today I'm still proud about that fact. But at the same time, on the other side of the ocean, Martin Luther King, he's a religiously oriented black member of the liberation movement. And he says, quote, "When we discover the power of love, we will create a new world out of the old world. Love is the only path." End quote. In my life, this insight came late. I sensed it, but what that was supposed to mean and how do you translate this in a real political concept, practice, it took a long time until I brought these aspects together. You come from two different directions at the same time. And when love also includes all of the erotic aspects, eros, and the soul, you land in a place that so far was never connected with politics. But it had to come together. And so in addition to the community, a love school emerged where the participants of the community learned to show openly their inner conflicts in the issues of love, sex, partnership, and solve them in solidarity. And it took years and decades up until today. It is still a main topic today, but not only of myself and of Tamera. It is a main topic of the entire socialist movement, if it at all still takes its own human aim serious. And we are in the process of forming a worldwide network in this connection of love and politics. This is historically new, and we can also be a little bit proud that we are the initial spark of a new historic movement, and we're allowed to act in that way. It is a beautiful story. When you look onto the evolution of the revolutionary movements of the past 2000 years, and you look at this from a certain distance, then one can perceive that we are in a mutation point of human evolution today. And it is clear that we don't do that alone, for sure. But we are in a place where the political direction, a new socialism, is being connected with a sexual erotic direction, a culture of free love, and a new form, a new spiritual direction. We call that transformation, and it is spiritual mental powers which have to lead the way into the future. We are built from spirit. Each ethics belongs to a spiritual world that we are a part of, and we human beings have the task here on earth to take on that mandate on this spiritual level, and as gardeners of this earth create a beautiful cultural landscape for humans, animals, waters, and forests.
Thank you for this comprehensive response. You already answered some of the coming questions, intended questions. And I want to go deeper, ask deeper to the keyword of free love, and which in 1968 was a word that was in everybody's mouth and mind. And because you emphasized the work on freeing love, and you stayed faithful to this task. What does it mean today, I want to ask you, and how has this term evolved over the last 50 years?
Free love doesn't have a recipe, and that simply means to love without lie, or submission without lies, without deceit, without fear, on eye level with all the partners that you love. I said that very quickly and compact. And it means an own work, love without power games and impulses of rule. This is part of free love. Sexuality without lies and deceit is part of free love. Another understanding of faithfulness is part of free love. Absolutely. Somebody who loves for sure will stay faithful to that partner if the partner goes with other people erotically, lovingly. I also want to do that. So it's vice versa. It's a mutual truth. Stay on the basis of truth. That you no longer need to look at the other in mistrust. What does she do? What does he do? Get out of the ghetto of lies. It is a fundamental lie in which the entire society, at least Western society, is moving in. If you look at that, how much you had to lie when you were married or you are in a normal relationship, how much we ourselves had to lie in order to keep the relationship up and good, until the point where one felt that I can no longer lie. In my life story, this moment came rather quick, rather early. At some point in the 70s, I realized I cannot do that. I was full with sexual desire towards many women, and at some point I started to sense that it is the same for the women. And so I was forced almost to make it clear to my partner back then, this is how it is for me, and I hope that we can still stay together, which did not work out. Up to the point where in this new form of honesty I found a woman, Babette Sabine Lichtenfels. She had to think about it, what I said, but she realized that it is just the same for her. And it was a release, and we started to have the trust relationship which each love needs. We didn't have to lie to each other anymore. And if you understand this, what kind of joy arises? You can start to believe in love again. What was destroyed in the student movement in the 60s, 70s, you realize that this very point is resurrecting again, and it is what all men, all women desire and want. And it was about creating a social system which enables this form of free love, which in many cases also leads to a partnership where in places where people don't need to lie to each other, partnerships arise by themselves. It's a mystery of life. Maybe a secret of God or the goddess. I don't want to define anything here. It is a mystery of life that people find each other who stay faithful to each other forever, for they have no longer to lie to each other, and in some mysterious way they belong to each other. Later on we will also enter deeper into this whole area of the genders and to see more what it means besides reproduction of the human race. But it took long enough for people to realize that. But now humanity starts to sense that the relation of the genders really serves love. In the fairy tales of the Grimm brothers, love was always crashing at some point. In Hollywood, love never works. And from the fairy tales up to Hollywood, there is a line of longing inherent in that. And up until today, thousands of young love couples, they walk through the streets of Berlin, New York, or Toronto, not knowing where to put this energy, this search and question. Worldwide, the entire world is in that absurd not knowing regarding the questions of love, sex, partnership. It is a global love sickness that we are in. And from there you start to build war systems, rockets. That's for sure. He still has a penis that is erected, and then he needs to translate that into systems of war. And you could see that in the dialogue between Kim in North Korea and Donald Trump. I wanted to say Donald Duck. How they have waved with their arms, with their rockets, with their erected penises. This is the culture of men that will exist as long as men do not know how to use that powers and energies in a different, healthy way. And this is a question of both genders. The deepest trauma topic of all of humanity happened or lies in sex, love, and partnership. This is where we want to form a correction, create a correction at this very basis, which then maybe leads to a planetary movement. And I want to add something about Rudi Dutschke, this German student leader. He said we need to create systems in which utopia becomes visible concretely. And he was totally right. But the left movement in Germany did not know how a concrete utopia, concretely manifested utopia could look like. But I started to sense it. I was in this solitude in Bavaria, and I had half a year to think about how life is meant, how life is supposed to be, life of us as human beings in general. And it became clear to me that we have to create a system in which utopia is anticipated. Anticipation was a big word in the student movement back then. You have to create this anticipation. Create communes, forms on life where the social, the ethical, the ecological, the economic life in general, the spiritual life, where all of these aspects of life refer to, are in alignment with this utopia of truth and love. And so, step by step, we came to the discovery that for this real, concrete utopia, there is not only a plan in us people, but there exists a plan in the universe, in the higher spheres of reality. There is an objective order, or when I create it more carefully, I say in the building plan, in the architecture of creation, there is a possibility for this concrete utopia, which we call the sacred matrix. There is a world order latently possible in alignment with the sacred matrix. And this is a matrix of love, which is then true for humans among themselves, also humans and animals, as is visible in the encounters of humans and animals, for example, in this one movie of the man and the crocodile. Wrong kind of power is overcome by us no longer obeying to it, no longer giving resonance to it innerly. And in order to be able to do so, we need those new structures. We call them healing biotopes, where people, step by step, agree to no longer give in, but also to no longer give resonance to the existing violence. Because at some point you realize that when you accept love, when you take on love, and you stop lying, there is a power which is stronger than all violence. A child that stands in front of you, which is entirely without fear. You cannot beat that child. In order to be aggressive, you need a certain resonance. No man could beat a woman if she, theoretically, is entirely fearless, because the perpetrator needs a resonance, and this resonance he gains through the fear of the victims. We back then believed that through fight we would be the winners, we would succeed. But today we start to recognize this principle of resonance. We retreat from the resonance with the current society and world, and we step into resonance with the sacred matrix. Truth has a lot to do with contact, communication with all beings.
Maybe fitting for this part, and maybe as a last question for this first part. Currently we experience, also as a part of a evolution of revolutionary movements, especially initiated through indigenous forces. And we experience a movement that is called Defense the Sacred. It's emerging in different places of the earth, where a spiritual and a political thought are coming together, impulse are coming together. And you mentioned already the sacred matrix. What does this sacred mean in the political context?
The key word, defend the sacred, stems from the movement which started out in Standing Rock, Dakota, as the struggle of the Sioux tribe against the oil pipelines which were supposed to be laid through their property, through their land. Defend the sacred. In this case, nature and the waters were what was sacred. And from afar, we for sure immediately supported this struggle until the initiators, the indigenous initiators of that campaign came to Tamera. And then we could widen this term of the sacred. Love is part of the sacred, in the center. Defend the sacred. Defend love. Truth is part of that. Besides the sacred which lies in nature, in plants, animals, waters, in the light, in all those secrets of the natural world, the world of creation, besides all that which is sacred, there is also something sacred within the human being. Love for your neighbor, compassion is something sacred. Ethics is something sacred. And so we are trying in a worldwide alliance to apply this widened term of defend the sacred for many regions of the world. Standing rock is in many places of this earth. We know that Palestine, but for example also the peace communities in Colombia, matters, struggles in Africa, we know all of this. We try to use and expand this term of defend the sacred in agreement, in alignment with its indigenous initiators. We try to use and expand that term for the movement of global healing biotopes, Terra Nova, but all of this is the same. The beautiful thing about it is that the existential depth of this term was so visible in Standing Rock. The very life foundations of so many people are at stake. In places of Brazil where they are clear-cutting rainforests, people are dying. In the places where in Africa waters are redirected for Western flower companies to water their products, people are dying from droughts. They have no water anymore. Entire families and villages are dying because they have no more water. Standing Rock is everywhere. Standing Rock is the keyword for a movement of liberation that we have joined and from which we can only hope that it globally expands and that it succeeds. And at the moment it does not look too bad. Besides all the cruel things that happen, there are also news of hope. And I say that carefully. Slowly it happens. And from a certain place, when a certain power of liberation has accumulated on earth, when there is a certain threshold over, like when we stepped over a certain threshold, something very astonishing happens, which is morphogenetic field effect. It's very important and surprising to know that it was discovered by biologists, Rupert Sheldrake and others. We know that in biology, but for sure the same is true for the social development of humanity. There is a critical threshold for suppression and stupidity. When this is broken through, overcome, a spirit awakens, and this spirit is humanitarian spirit. We are connected to it. It is genetically connected within all of us. As a genetic basic matrix, we are connected to it. Violence, rule of dominance, all those cruel things that happen today are the result of a history of human evolution which has evermore detached from that basic core matrix. So it is epigenetic damage of the body and the soul. We can recognize that today, and we want to make global healing work. This is the task of Tamera. Healing, peace, liberation are all synonym terms. They all mean, we mean the same by them. Global healing work is global peace work and a global liberation work. Theology of liberation, which for a certain time in South America has filled the people with power and inner cohesion in a very powerful way, mighty way, it was not enough. We want to enrich and widen the theology of liberation through a sexual basis, and I mean that in an ethical way, and also by a new view on theology, religio, religion, reconnection of humanity with its spiritual powers from which everything emerges.
Thank you very much for the responses, the answers. And I would suggest that we take a short break now. And in a few moments, we are back for the second part. Thank you very much. Before you all leave, the break will be until 11:05 local time, and we would like to sing a song together to stay in resonance with the spoken words, to the knowledgeable, wise words for the system change that we are in. And the keyword love brings me to this one is for Martin. It is so beautiful as you're loving and compassionate and thinking hard. Thank you for your work.
Your life seems small like a tragic scene, a magic dream which you had when you were 17, and you were the one to change the world all around. Yes, you were the one to change the world all around. But soon you gave up to live your dream that caused a scream within your heart, which was suffering, not being the one to change the world all around. And people always told you, be careful what to do, don't go around try to be too smart. And mother always told you, be careful who you love, be careful what to do, cause your lie becomes the truth. Yeah, live your dream, be a global lover. You're not the first, but remember you're part of the ones that make a difference under the sun. Yes, you're part of the ones that make a difference under the sun. You might be 20 or 45, what about your life? Still you pretend life is a joke. Look at the globe, we need a seed of hope. So take my strong advice, now's the best time for you to decide. You decide. This new decision might set you free eternally, strengthen your power so gracefully. You can be the one to change the world all around. Sometimes it is not easy to be faithful to your way. Then listen what your angels say. They come and stand right by you when they smell a sweet perfume. That happens very soon when the truth is in the room. Yeah, live your dream, be a global lover. You're not the first, but remember you're part of the ones that make a difference under the sun. Live your dream, be a global lover. You're not the first, but remember you're part of the ones that make a difference under the sun. Yes, you're part of the ones that make a difference under the sun. If you're gonna change your mind, honey, I'm the first in line. Create the dreams in reality and awaken from the blind. If you're gonna change your mind, honey, I'm the first in line. We create the dreams in reality, cause you're part of the ones that make a difference under the sun. Live your dream, be a global lover. Live your dream, bring your sisters and brothers. Live your dream, use your magic powers. Live your dream, be a global lover. Live your dream, bring your sisters and brothers. Live your dream, use your magic powers.
Solani, Solani, we, Solani, 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 we, Solani, 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 we, Solani, Kutenina, Kutenina, Ulilache. Sola wena, inyambezi. Sola wena, inyambezi. Sola wena, inyambezi. Kola mesho, alela.
Tembeka, we tembeka. Tembeka, we tembeka. Tembeka, we tembeka. Kutenina ulela che. Sola wena inyambezi. Sola wena inyambezi. Sola wena inyambezi. Kulamisho alelayo. Solani we Solani. Solani we Solani. Solani we Solani. Kutenina ulelache.
Welcome back. I want to start with questions that I couldn't ask in the first round of this interview, and I perceive as so important that I want to ask them, and then there are also questions of the audience. I want to ask a question about the topic that the 68 movement also very strongly stood up against the Nazi time, the Nazi time. And when we take the parallels to today, we have also fascist movements rising up again. And my question is, what does resistance against these movements mean today, and how can we not only fight fascism but structurally dissolve it? Where does the resolution of this phenomenon lie?
Thank you for the question. Fascism is in the first place not a political phenomena, but fascism is a psychological phenomena. The fascist structure is anchored in an unsatisfied human organism which only finds redemption in becoming violent. Fascism is a collective organism of violence on a level of government and state, of a people which in its own underground has no anchorage point and no fulfillment. Therefore, the common orientation towards Adolf Hitler or Mussolini, or now we have, well, no more names now, don't want to go back to prison. The collective orientation towards so-called autocrats. That's what we say today. And Putin is part of that, of course, in Moscow. But that is a euphemism compared to what they really do in Russia or in Turkey or in Israel or wherever. All these things are based in, as Alice Miller recognized, in a social surrounding in their childhood that didn't allow these children and the coming adults any fulfillment, any orientation. But the human being does need community, does need an orientation. The aggression, the energies, the forces have to go somewhere. And as long as these forces are not humanized, that long there will be fascist and right-wing populist movements. And the humanization of these forces very clearly consists of the sexual basal forces of the human being lifted to a higher level, where through contact and a social ethics can be humanized. One of the main thoughts of the healing biotopes. Not suppression of the sexual desires and the animalistic drives, the beautiful animalistic forces of the flesh, no suppression, also not in couple relationships and married couples, but humanizing integration of these forces through contact. A person who is able to do that cannot become a fascist. A man, a human being who knows this kind of contact, has found it in love and sexuality, cannot be a fascist. Because his soul and his body receive different steering impulses. His organism is putting out other peptides, other neurotransmitters into the system. If I'm well embedded in a community with fulfilled love and fulfilled sexuality, positive steering impulses and neurotransmitters are put into the body. I cannot hate other people of other religions and other races. I cannot hate them if I'm embedded on a ground of being, of contact and love. And this base ground is inherent in us from evolution. And we can build that with each other. We can create it with each other. It might take a few decades, but I think it's speeding up. I think it is speeding up, and we can gain that trust faster and faster. All the processes that we had to go through back then, back in the days, and not all communities have to go through that now. I trust that there is a process of morphogenetic field building, and that emerging communities now can enter this field of I'm sure it will take some time, but I'm in California or in Facha, Palestine, and very different areas of the earth, communities will emerge that are similar. What's going on in Tamera right now? It is simply part of our nature. It is also part of our intellectual development. The inner figure of the human being is steered towards community, contact, and human fulfillment.
Thank you. And now I would like to ask a question of Betsy from Damanhur. and she asks, what was the role that psychedelic drugs played back then in this time, and what kind of meaning do you give to psychedelics for the widening of consciousness?
It was really important, and actually the whole wave of acid, LSD, end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s was a movement towards a new opening of consciousness, in principle. Just to say that it has a psychedelic effect, and people are so so overwhelmed by the psychedelic effect that they get stuck in it. And at the same time, the psychedelic effect is so beautiful, you just want to have it back and again and again. What you do not have in real life, you have at least through the substance in these moments, and you keep taking it. But this does not help. This is not the meaning of it. The original meaning of the substance is not a lasting consumption. The substance is there to, it's like a like a can opener. There's something in our brain, in our organism, a can that needs to be opened, and for this we use the substance. And then you look deeply into this can, and you have to see it. It's not psychedelic effects that is in there, that are in. You recognize the being, your own being, or the being, the essence of nature, the being of an animal. Well-used substances open the eyes of heart and brain. And we hardly have any medicine, drug culture in Tamera. We have to think about that, how we want to design that. We don't have to deal with it so much now, but to not forget all indigenous cultures had substances, of course, to create and open the inner contact to the spiritual world. That is the meaning. A deep and profound sense of religion, of reconnection of the human being with the divine world that we are coming from.
Thank you. One question that came from various people from the audience now refers to interesting or radical movements which developed also after '68. And as you know, there is a documentary in the internet at the moment about the whole movement of Osho, Bhagwan. And you were in Pune back then, you witnessed that movement, and my question is, what is your comment to what happened back then, and what can we learn from the rise and the downfall of a movement that created so much hope and then got stuck?
This movement was important, and Osho Bhagwan was partly an enlightened human being. But he didn't have any correction through the community, but instead was idolized to this Jesus-like guru type, and he liked that, and he enjoyed it to be a guru. Then it turned a little strange. They created a golden throne for him, not pure gold, but in the direction, in the Buddha Hall of Pune. He got one Rolls Royce after the other. At the end he had 93 Rolls Royce. A guru with 93 Rolls Royces. And it was sweet. And around 3,000 people who just said Bhagwan and looked at him, adoring him. 3,000 devotees, 3,000 who thought exactly the same as him. You have to experience that. It is
Frightening. It is frightening.
you don't have a partner, you don't have an opposite anymore, where a real contact from center to center is taking place. I know from the beginning, to begin with, what he will say. If I have a question, this collectivism, which was also taking place in Friedrichshof, Pune and Friedrichshof, they were exchangeable in that place. And both were important, and both were glued to a guru system which is created by children's souls. They were all children who needed a leader, a guide, an orientation. By the way, the Marxist left, also all children. On the one side, anti-authoritarian revolution, finally you ask somebody. On the other side, an eternal repetition of older authorities like Karl Marx or Trotsky or Bakunin, depending on the fraction that you were part of, Lenin. No real own substance. The opposite. It was always a collectivism that was a collectivism that was actually steering against building your own substance. For example, just a small example, I made a survey when I was 25 in Mannheim, and I asked the people, do you really believe in the dictatorship of the of the working class? And they actually said yes. And with everybody I asked. And then I knew they are all living in a hypnosis. They are not in their own mind anymore. They didn't think themselves anymore. If ever we succeed in creating a true community that can follow the humanitarian goals of a real communism, real socialism, and realize them, then this community has to consist of autonomous individuals. Autonomous individual people that take the responsibility for themselves and for the community. That say what they think themselves and not what somebody else or the guru thinks. This is an unlearning. The whole authoritarian character structure that was described in the School of Frankfurt by Adorno needs to be transformed, but not into an anti-authoritarian character. That's the same stuff. And there wouldn't be an anti-authoritarian movement if the people wouldn't have been so fixed to authority. Understand that. It were children that were fixed onto authority that made the revolution. And sooner or later we have to stop with this with this hypnosis and really step into a realm of truth. Profound work, thoroughness, real communication about the real issues from myself, from you, of all of us.
Thank you very much. We have 5 minutes left, and I would like to inquire on this question more, because you said before that the movements needed a common enemy in order to be cohesive, to come together, and just now you said they needed a guru to come together. What does it mean, or how can a movement or community succeed if it does not use both of these tools?
The way we do it. We do something which we call SD forum. 50 people sit in a circle, and somebody who is burning somewhere and goes into the middle of the circle and is allowed to say what he or she thinks freely, without fear. There's no judgment. And through this sense of being accepted and being allowed to speak the truth, an inner organ is activated, a thinking organ or another organ, an organ for autonomous evolution inside. Everything you bring into the middle, all your personal conflicts, all that stuff, is not me. I copied other people or read it in books, and then I identified with it. Because the problems, we pretty much have the same problems, everybody, but that's not me. The SD Forum is there to liberate the people that step into the middle from their own troubles and problems, to de-identify the people. So whoever goes to the middle and talks about their own love conflict is choosing a path to objectify the conflict. You can make fun of it or in some way objectify this conflict, and to free yourself from the identification that puts you down so much in all this gravity and trouble. And through this process, the thinking organ gets freed and activated. All of a sudden you feel like, wow, there is something else, another self in myself. I witness what kind of theater I perform here. All of a sudden I become a lord in my own house. And no other authority is implanted in me, shall be implanted in me. And people that meet like that, they meet on eye level. And from these contacts, love is springing forth, and true grassroots democracy. This is important. Grassroots democracy, it's beautiful. The word is beautiful. We need grassroots democracy. That means a system can meet each other on eye level, where they are able to do that, but they can only do that when they take each other serious, and they only can take each other serious when you know the other person says the truth. She or he says what she or he thinks, and they actually do what they say and think. And this moment, the hypnosis is broken. This is a really important aspect of our work. And I try to write short articles in the beginning of the Tageszeitung, and other left articles, articles for left-wing newspapers, and not one of these articles was accepted. They were offended. There was a certain idea of collectivism which was not allowed to be shaken, and this new community, the new community cannot be based on this collectivism, but on the autonomous individual of its participants, is still a new thought, even today. And the truth that we need to risk this autonomy is the truth in sexuality. In the end, this is where we come back to. Yep.
I say thank you for this final sentence, and also for the whole interview, for the view onto the picture of an autonomous human being and the possibility of a new revolution in which the political thought connects with the erotic and the spiritual. And so I want to greet again all the people who watch this interview in the world, all friends and companions, and that we may work together for that aim, defend the sacred. Thank you very much.